Okotoks. Woohoo, Okotoks. West Africa. On Saturday was in West Africa and India. Wow.
Well traveled.
Yeah. Toronto. Simone has raised her hand.
Yeah, I was wondering, it says that this is part 2 of 3. I must have missed part 1. Where may I find that?
There's a link actually in the Eventbrite link that you registered, that you used to register for this session. There's a link to the first session, but we'll make the first session available as well. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth it. It's worth the watch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Babette, I think that's great. And I think even in the follow-up to this evening's session, we'll add the link to the first session in there as well.
Okay.
It's good to, it's important to know though that it's not you don't have to have seen the first one to enjoy this session. They're on completely different aspects of confidence.
Yeah, excellent point, Susan.
Yep, no, perfect. And yeah, we're looking at rounding out our whole confident self, from leadership to financial to finding our worth and our value. So it's basically just to really help the entire self.
So what do you think? Should we get started?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Babette Machelka and I'm part of the events program team here for Lean In Calgary. Thank you for taking the time to join us today and for what I'm sure is going to be a great session. So as mentioned before, today's session, Embrace Your Leadership Style, is part 2 of our confidence series. So again, we'll make sure that the link is available for the first session if you've missed it. It's again, highly recommend. It's a great session as well. It's called Know Your Worth. So tonight I would like to acknowledge the land that we're on. For our guests joining us from Calgary, we gather in the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 Nations in Southern Alberta and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Our city is located where the Bow River meets the Elbow River. This site has long been called Mohkinstsis, and it is the birthplace of the city of Calgary. So before we begin the session, I would like to introduce Susan Alford, Lean In Calgary's president, to share a few words with us.
Thank you, Babette. I'm so thrilled to be here this evening to welcome everyone. We've got 75 people on the line and we had hundreds of people register. And so it'll be really great for everyone to be able to watch this post event for anyone who wasn't able to make it. So welcome to you too if you're watching this on recording. So this is our second in our series on confidence. This is such a hot topic. We have gotten such tremendous feedback from all over the world, as you can tell, from women dialing in who wanted to learn how they can be more confident in every area of their life and work. So confidence is particularly hot now, I feel, because so many of us have been impacted from working from home and not showing up in the world in our usual way. You know, if we're working at home in our sweatpants, doesn't have quite the same ring of confidence. I'm even wearing shoes right now just so I feel a little bit more like I'm at a podium instead of just sitting at my desk where I've been most of the day. So I bet many of us are feeling like we're maybe even hiding behind our computers at home instead of out there doing the important things in the world that we like to think of ourselves as doing. Tammy is here to help us with showing up confidently at work, no matter how and where you're working during these times. One of the things that I love about what Tammy's about to tell us is how we can learn confidence. It's actually a muscle that we can grow with practice. There's a book that I read a few years ago called The Confidence Code by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman. And it was actually my reading of that book that inspired this series around confidence. Did you know that men are actually born with more confidence than women? Thankfully, there are things that we can do to help ignite that confidence no matter our gender. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Lean In for those of you that this may be your first event with Lean In. Lean In was started by Sheryl Sandberg about 6 years ago after she wrote the book Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead. And she wrote it after realizing that the further that she climbed through university and corporate America, the less women she found around her. And she got curious about that. Like, why is she, what she was wondering, why am I in a room full of men? Like, where are all the women? What happened to them? We all started, and now I'm here by myself. So she got curious about what she had done differently. And so this is why she wrote Lean In, not knowing that she would spark a movement, a global movement of women wanting to hear more. Now, Lean In is in 184 countries with more than 35 circles around the world. And Lean In Calgary is one of 3 citywide networks in Canada. We also have Lean In Toronto and Lean In Vancouver, and we're looking at birthing more. So we launched here in Calgary in September of 2019, and since then we've grown to over 700 members. You can be a member too. It's free. You just sign up to our newsletter at leanincanada.com. Membership is free, and you'll be the first to know about future events and additional resources to help you build your career and your ambitions. The benefit to us to Lean In, if you sign up, is that we'll be able to access more funding from sponsors and from the Lean In org to be able to continue to provide these events for free or at greatly reduced rates once we go back in person. So please do sign up. It will help us to have your name on our mailing list. Further to that, should you be interested in joining or starting a circle, which is a smaller group that gather often monthly around a theme or a common purpose, please do reach out. We'll be happy to connect you with some circle leaders to help you get started. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Babette, who will be introducing tonight's speaker. Thanks, Babette.
I couldn't find the mute button. You'd think after a year of this, I would be a pro. Thanks, Susan. So as I just mentioned, I know many of us have been on these virtual calls for over a year now, but just a few friendly reminders before we get started. So please mute yourself if you're not speaking. There will be an opportunity to during the Q&A to raise your hand and ask a question if you're comfortable with that. We encourage you to turn your video on if you feel comfortable. There's no pressure, but we love seeing all your smiling faces. And if you want to change the view to see the speaker better, you can click on the upper right-hand corner of your screen and change to speaker view instead of gallery view. And if you haven't already, feel free to use the chat, say hi, and you've already most of you told us where you're from. So you can also use the chat to make comments throughout the session and ask Tammy a question during the Q&A. And we will be recording the session as well, and including a link. And before I introduce Tammy, to kick off the session, we're going to play a really short video clip, which it sets the tone for the session, but it's kind of a quiet clip. So if you can, please make sure you have your video volume turned up and your microphone muted. Okay, let's get on with our main event and why we're here tonight. So I am so excited to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Tammy Arseneau, Vice President of Culture and Organization Transformation at Suncor Energy. Tammy has over 20 years of experience in oil and gas and consulting within Canada and overseas. Her focus is on business transformation, culture, and leadership. Her current role is to define and implement a new culture for Suncor to realize its future goals and ensure people are ready for the change that comes with transformation. And tonight, she will share her journey and perspectives on how to hone your strengths and embrace your leadership style. So with that, we'll start the video clip and then Tammy will take it away.
What happened with you and Lily?
I don't know. I guess I didn't listen to something she told me or something. I mean, I liked her. It's like you embarrass yourself if you say something, and you embarrass yourself if you don't.
You know, sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Just literally 20 seconds of just embarrassing bravery. And I promise you, something great will come of it.
Good evening, everybody. I guess I'm not sure what time zone is everywhere. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everybody. My name is Tammy, and I don't know how many of you have actually seen that movie, and I wouldn't mind just engaging here a little bit before we jump into the content. But that clip comes from a movie called We Bought a Zoo. It's something that my boys and I have really enjoyed watching. And the clip, just in case you couldn't hear it, was about a boy who is really interested in a young girl. And he was having a really hard time. And it's one of those precious moments between a son and his dad and seeking advice. And I just, if you couldn't hear it, he said, I don't know what's really going on with Lily. And the dad said, all you need sometimes is that 20 seconds of insane courage. So I'm just curious, once you guys, if you've seen the movie or you hadn't seen the movie, I'm just curious to get some feedback again in the chat. You guys are really good at this chat. I'm really curious to get some of your insights and feedback in the chat about what did that clip speak to you? Did it speak to you, and what did it mean to you? And I'm just going to have a look just to see what some of the comments are. So how do you think the clip on courage relates to what we're going to talk about in terms of leadership or confidence?
Take a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, you only need a little bit of courage to have confidence. Yep. Trust yourself. If you decide before it's begun, it's over. Or if you just, yeah, exactly. The first step's the hardest. Don't be afraid. Move through your fear. These are awesome. Follow your instincts. I love it. Thank you so much. Face your fears. So a lot of what you just put in the chat is what the themes are for the discussion today. So we're going to talk about courage, and we're going to talk about the connection between courage and confidence. Because sometimes, like Susan said, confidence and leading can be learned, but first you need courage to step into confidence. So we're going to have that conversation. We're going to talk about leadership styles, and we're going to talk about authenticity. But before we get into that, I just thought I would share a little bit about who I am. So thank you, Babette, for the great introduction. So I grew up in the east coast of Canada, so New Brunswick and Ontario for those who live here. I've been in Calgary, Alberta for 10 years. I work for Suncor Energy. I put the logo there at the bottom. So Suncor is a oil and gas organization, 40 billion market cap, 13,000 employees, and in a very traditional oil sands, oil and gas industry and organization. So I'm very honored to be asked to focus on culture and move the organization to a different culture. So that's a little bit about the work that I do and the company in which I work. You see the picture of my family there on the right-hand side. So I'm married. I have 3 gorgeous boys who I love to death. They're amazing and they teach me a lot. I mean, I love that video clip for what it teaches me, but also what it teaches them about courage and what I see in them. So that's why I love that clip, and we use it quite often in our family about courage and just taking that 20 seconds, just taking that leap of faith. So my background is I have an undergrad in HR. I have an MBA through Henley Management College in the UK. It's a business school in the United Kingdom. I actually earned my MBA while I was pregnant with 2 of these boys, so it took me a few years to get through, but I did. And I also wanted to share a little bit more about my background, because I do feel that our leadership and who we are and who we show up at work is formed by all of our experiences. So my experiences early in life, my parents died when I was young. My mom died when I was 5. My dad died when I was 15. And I put myself through school. I went on to my MBA, as I mentioned. And I think that's important because, the positive side of that is I had to learn the courage. I had to learn the confidence to take that first step. On the flip side, I didn't have that grounding that we sometimes get with the encouragement, etc. So I was starting, I would say, at a deficit of confidence as I entered the working world. But every time I stepped into something new and took a bit more courage, I learned and gained confidence. So confidence can be learned and leadership can be learned. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So on a lighter note, let's jump into some of the content around leadership. So some of the questions that come up, and maybe if we go to the next slide and we talk about, what is your leadership style? Because often we jump in and we start talking about courage and confidence. And depending on where you are in your career, some people don't know what their leadership style is. So I just wanted to, put a few things out there, and I'm sure there's a lot more than this. And in no way am I putting a plug for any one of these. There's just an example of some assessments if you're unsure or unaware of what your leadership style is. So there's assessments like MBTI. So that's the Myers-Briggs. There's DISC, there's Strength Finder. So there's a number of them. If you're unsure what your leadership style is, that these can help. Another way is less formal than assessments, and it's feedback. So 360, asking for, your leader, one-on-one, peers, employees. And you know what I didn't put on here? I didn't put family. And I know my boys are certainly humbling and always the first to offer up feedback. So if you're unsure of what your leadership style is, I think these are some of the tools that you can use. So for me, early in my career, I would say it was probably in my 20s, I did some of these, and I think it was the Strength Finder and the MBTI. And some of the data or the feedback that I had received was around, I'm an introverted thinker. So if you are familiar with the MBTI, being an introvert, being a thinker, intuition, those types of things emerged for me. And when I did another assessment around the Strength Finder, I found, or I learned, and this was early in my career. So I was in my 20s, and it was something about visibility, and it was 0. And I thought, how can my visibility be 0? And it was really quite shocking to me. I can't tell you all the positive aspects that come out of all these assessments, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but it was interesting because it was a turning point for me to make a decision about how I wanted to show up and how I was showing up. So the message maybe also that I wanted to share is it's okay to be yourself and be authentic. And it is also important to understand how you're showing up or how you're perceived and the things that are important and you need to work on. So I wanted to share that to show you that leadership is learned. That's something that I've worked on in visibility, and clearly I'm visible to all of you today, but this is not a natural thing for me. It's something I've had to work on, being an introvert, being quieter in meetings, learning to get the confidence to speak up are all very, very, very important and things that I have learned along the way. Now, how do you harness? Yeah, you can go to the next slide. That's wonderful. So harnessing your unique leadership qualities. Another thing that I've found out, for being in this work for a long time, and it's interesting, I even went and looked again and thought, geez, what are the leadership styles? And depending on what you Google, there's 4 leadership styles, there's 5, there's 8, there's 10, there's tons of books. I think there's probably a multi-billion-dollar business on defining what good leadership is. And there's no one good leadership trait. I learned that along the way, and that's one thing I wanted to share with all of you. So where I ended up with, rather than trying to define myself outward in terms of all these frameworks, I started to think inwards. And what does it mean to me? Who am I as a leader? What impact do I have? What am I convicted about? So my purpose. So when I think about conviction, I think about what type of leader do I want to be for people? What values and what am I convicted in? And the more I did that, the more I became authentic. Not trying to be somebody else is actually less tiring. Trying to be somebody else is actually extremely tiring and hard to maintain. So to be yourself and to trust yourself, having that courage to be yourself, because in fact, it often takes courage to be who you want to be and what's important to you. So to trust yourself have courage to do that, build confidence. So my offer maybe to you is to figure out for you what's important to you. How do you come across? Get the feedback, whether it's in the assessments or the 360 or asking your family, how did they experience you? And if you don't already, have a plan or to decide on what type of leader do you want to be? Who are you? What are your strengths? Because I mentioned that I focused on the weakness that probably came out in those assessments, which I think we do way too often. And an example in that, and I love Susan's story about, men being born with more confidence than women. I often share with people that I mentor that when people apply for a job, let's say at Suncor, women will look at the list of things that are required and say, I only have 8 out of 10. I'm not applying for that. Oh, I just had some feedback. Everybody on mute? All right, thank you. And on the converse side, what we experience too is some men will apply and go, wow, I have 2 out of the 10. That's exciting. I'm a shoe-in for it. So I think that's really important to know who you are, understand what's important to you, and have some conviction. And also have the courage to apply for those roles that you think you're not qualified for. One example to that is I had, and I hope she's on the call actually, a young lady here in Calgary. She was a co-op student at Suncor and she applied for one of my roles. And one of my roles, it was requiring, 5 to 10 years experience. And there was quite a bit in there, but she was clearly a co-op student just out of school. So she applied. I called her, I interviewed her, by the way. I made sure I interviewed her. And I called everybody back who applied for the role, not just her. And I thank everybody for applying to my roles. And I give them feedback on why or why not. But I was particularly struck by her, and I wanted to reinforce and tell her how proud I was of the courage that it must have taken her to apply for that role and be interviewed. So I think this is an example within the Lean In and within the community that we have to continue to reinforce and support each other as well. So next slide. I can't wait to get into the Q&A, by the way. Another message I want to share and things I've learned along the way is it's really hard for all of us. We want validation. Am I showing up okay? Are people going to accept my ideas? And I would say all those things are healthy and normal. Companies are now focusing more and more on inclusion and belonging, which I think is important because feeling a part of something, feeling people are like you or that they accept you increases confidence. So both of those are okay. Getting recognition, the sense of belonging, they're not only okay, they're healthy. The area where I think sometimes we fall down is putting others' opinions and feelings above our own. So when we're looking at being ourselves and building confidence, one thing to remember is what do you feel and what do you think? So I often get asked about being in I have a different style. I have a style where I really want to focus on being kind, being authentic, focusing on my team. When you think about that in a traditional oil and gas, it's not probably the first thing that comes to mind. So people often ask how I can continue to be confident in maybe an environment where not everybody's like me or thinks like me. And I go back to what I talked about in the previous slide. Those are things I'm convicted about. I know that's who I am and who I want to be as a leader. And if that's not a place for me in this or any other organization, that's okay. This is who I want to be. And I have conviction for it. And I have conviction for my people. So that bottom one is really important, but I had to learn that along the way. And I shared a story with the team as we were just going through this of a time, and it probably wasn't so long ago actually. And I've been working for a long time now, but it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago where I was in my boss's office. He's on the executive team. And he was giving me feedback on my leadership style, and I was quiet and introverted and all those wonderful things that I see as strengths. And I did say that. And I did say, you know what, if that, and the example that I'd used was somebody who I did not admire. I did not think that was the leadership style or the culture that we wanted in that organization. And I said, if that's who you want me to be as a female leader, then I'm out. And in that moment, it was almost more convincing to myself that it mattered more to me to be who I am as a leader and to hold true to that conviction than it was about what other people thought of me. And I'm now vice president. I don't think I was at the time. So if you ever wonder about taking that step, sticking up for yourself, having courage, I would say that anything you want is on the other side of fear. And that became true for me. I put a little quote. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this is a quote that I've had for a long time in the back of my head. I have a few. One is, I don't know if anybody has heard it. It's Al Capone, and because kindness is an important thing for me. And it's, don't mistake my kindness for weakness, and yada, yada, yada. And because it comes from Al Capone, I always felt charged up. I always felt like if Al Capone can say this, then I can say this. Not that he's a great person to look up to, but it was more about the toughness of it. And I found strength in that. And I felt strong by being convicted about being kind. The other one that stood out, and I didn't know it was Marianne Williamson. It was actually on a movie, Coach Carter, because I watch a lot of movies about sports with my kids. And this one really just jumped out at me as well. And I wonder how much of this is true, that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, but our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. I love that. I think of that often. Am I more afraid of failing, or am I more afraid of succeeding? Something to think about. All right, next slide. I only have a few more, and then I can't wait to jump into Q&A and get your thoughts. And it's easier said than done. I think some of the questions came in and asked if I've ever had this experience of the imposter syndrome, and something that, you know, I don't know if it's innate or not, but I think we all share it, and I certainly have. And if you see on the left where it says assumption, this is what we feel like in those moments, those little yellow, that we don't know as much as everybody else, when in reality, what we know is often greater. It's as much or greater. So we were talking about if we could make that little yellow circle a lot bigger. So think about that. When you're in those moments where you're doubting yourself, or should I speak up in a meeting, or in those moments where you need courage, know that this could be true for you, that you actually know more than you even think. So how do you take those moments to recognize that, observe it, and then break through with courage? Another concept, and I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but we use it quite a bit at Suncor, and we've been using it to help shift our mindset and our culture, which is, if you haven't heard, it's a book from Carol Dweck, and we'll share these resources as well after. So I'm just going to hold up the book, and it's about growth mindset and the difference between a fixed mindset, which is always, if we grow up with that mindset, it's I'm right or wrong, or I'm good or bad leader, or I'm good or bad at this. And a growth mindset is taking a different approach. If you spoke up and it didn't work, to learn from it. What did I learn? What can I do differently? So it's not about being a good leader or a bad leader. It's about, how do I learn to have courage? How do I learn confidence? And how do I learn to lead? So those are some of the things that we'll share after as resources for you to think about, because I know it's easier said than done. Next slide, please. And how I found my voice. So just to summarize some of the things that we've talked about, I learned to value feedback, whether it was through the assessments, which, you know, the first time you get an assessment earlier in your career, you get feedback, it hurts. But shifting our mind to, what can I learn from the feedback, and how do I value it, and how do I ask for it? I learned to build on my strengths. That 1-0 visibility was a key weakness that I had to learn and work on. But I've learned to not obsess about the weaknesses and build on the strengths. My introverted nature helps me listen. I listen more. I observe more. Those are strengths. I identify my purpose and values. What am I convicted about? What type of leader do I want to be? And honestly, you know, I kind of discarded all those leadership manuals, and am I a, you know, authoritative? Like, those weren't helpful for me, but really thinking through authentic leadership and what does it mean for me and what am I convicted helped. I had things to work on, and I looked at people that I admired. So I saw how some people entered a conversation in a meeting, which was hard for me to do. And I would hear somebody say, well, I don't know if I got this right, or I'm thinking about this right, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I love that. I use that all the time, right? So look at people you admire and figure out the little tools, tricks, and tips that they use to enter a conversation, or whatever it is, the leadership things that you want to work on or build on. And admitting my mistakes. And again, this is the growth mindset to say, okay, well, and admitting it to other people, but admitting it to yourself and saying that's okay. You know, you may not have all the answers as a leader, but leading takes courage to make a decision, go into a certain direction. And if that direction didn't work, you need a little bit of humility to say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something different. And that's okay. Next slide. And this is just another quote that I love that speaks to me, and I'm sure you all have tons, but to be a great leader means to be authentically courageous. And I would say to be a confident leader, you need courage to become confident. And then the last slide are just some resources that, you know, are available here. I just put a few, I call them Tammy's picks, like when you go into a bookstore, but really there's tons that's out there. It's not that these are the only ones, but these are a few we mentioned, like growth mindset. There's articles, the assessment tools, as I mentioned, are there, but we'll provide these or any other after the session. So that's it. I am ready to get into some Q&A and conversation. Hopefully you guys are too.
Thank you, Tammy. That was really inspiring. Like what an incredible journey you've been on. And yeah, so let's dive right into the Q&A. So just a reminder, if you do have a question, just pop them in the chat. We're kind of keeping track of them, and we can read them out for Tammy, or you know, we'll just go with the flow here. So we have a few questions that we'll start with that were sent in when folks registered. So maybe we can address those first, Tammy, if you're good with that. So our first question, it's a really good one. How can introverts gain recognition within an extroverted environment?
Yeah, that's my challenge every day. It's, I mean, it's a really good question. And it's like I mentioned, I think there's times where you have to recognize that observing or being a little quieter, you need to take those moments. You need to take those courageous moments to speak up. And you may not have it all thought through or felt through or whatever your style is, but it's okay to start and to interject or be involved. I would also say, I don't know, it's like that moment that I decided that it was okay. Right. And when I was in that senior leader's office and he wanted me to be loud and extroverted, and I said, no, I am completely comfortable and confident with who I am, and that's who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somebody said permission. I gave myself permission to be me, and confidence grew from there. So I know it's challenging sometimes to get a word in edgewise. Hopefully your company is open, and people who are extroverted are very well aware as well. You know, and they love it to say, okay, I spoke enough. How about you? So even having conversations, or even saying I'm introverted. Hey, can you guys, you know, make sure that I get a moment to speak up and have something to say. I'm trying to read the chats at the same time. So I'm not ambidextrous.
No problem. We'll keep track of those. We'll help you with those. Yeah, no, that's a great response. There's another one here that talks about leadership assessment tools. So I know you had a slide there that had some resources. Just maybe this is addressed in one of those slides, but are there any recommended tools as a best practice to help advance DEI and belonging? I'm not sure what DEI stands for, but
could be inclusion, because it has belonging. I'm not sure. Diversity and inclusion, perhaps. It's a good question. I don't think I have an answer to that one. I'm not really sure. Yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Ah.
Christine.
Okay, well, maybe we'll move on
If
to another
somebody
one here.
knows, fill it in the chat. If somebody knows about leadership assessments or anything like that around diversity, equity, and inclusion, that would be great. I don't know on a personal level. I know as an organization, we do use Great Place to Work. They're a firm and they do a trust index for us. And the trust index also has an inclusion index as a subset of it. So are you building trust? Are people feeling included? Are you a credible leader? So it assesses leadership and assesses inclusion, but it's more from an organization and less so from an individual leader. Are you inclusive? Yeah.
Here's a really good one too that came in earlier. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome as you've progressed in your career? And if so, how did you work your way through it to believe you are the right person for the position?
Oh gosh, yes. Many, many, many times, too many to count. There probably was a turning point as well. I don't know if I told this story, but I've been telling a lot of stories lately. We have an industrial psychologist that I'm fortunate to work with as a senior leader at Suncor, but also in my role. And I didn't even recognize the imposter syndrome at first, but I wasn't speaking up, and he was part of these conversations or meetings. And he says, it's really curious to me, can I share an observation? So when a psychologist says that, you're like, oh, and he shared that, I know you have a lot to offer. I'm just curious why you're not offering it. And I said, well, I just figure they know, or they don't, what more do I have to add to this conversation? And it was just really peculiar because he's the one who called it out. And I was also nervous of the reaction. I realized as he pulled more out, and, he said, you don't own their reaction to what you have to say. So I'm more mindful. And I think this is all a journey, leadership, confidence, all of this. Some people are gifted with it, and, that's wonderful. I'm not one of those people who is gifted with confidence for many reasons, as we talked about at the outset. But it's a muscle to be exercised, and being mindful. And in those moments, and him putting out, now I step in and say, okay, you have an MBA in this stuff. You've been doing it for 20 years. He's an engineer. She's, something else. You got this. You got this. Say it. They need to hear it. So yeah, I do it. You work yourself up in those moments, and then it gets easier. You take that 20 seconds insane courage. All of a sudden it's 5 seconds. Then it's 2. And then it becomes more automatic.
I love that you said it's a muscle to train. I love that. Okay, let's see here. We've got a couple more here. Imposter syndrome. Okay, so we answered that. How to remain confident in difficult times. Again, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you remain confident in difficult times?
Yeah, it's being grounded on what you're convicted. And for me, that's what worked. So it's difficult. I mean, the pandemic's challenging. Our organization's going through quite a bit, so I can speak to my personal experience. But I am so convicted in changing the culture for our people. I'm so convicted for the people in the organization that they need to be cared for. We need to build trust, that keeps me going. I have confidence, just like, for people who have kids or pets, it's almost you become a superhuman when you're looking after something greater than yourself. And I always keep that in mind. What am I convicted about? Why am I really here? And I maintain my confidence and trajectory to keep going despite the challenges. I live in worlds of memes and quotes, so I'm really sorry if I overdo it here, but one of the quotes my team and I, because we're responsible for change and large scale transformation, and I always tell them that if planes take off in the headwind, so if you're experiencing headwind, that's okay, that's normal, that means we're doing something. So we actually gain confidence and momentum through challenges. If everything was easy, we're not doing anything. Or we're doing something, but Yeah, that's so true. So here's a couple that's coming through the chat, and this is a really good one. Okay.
I'm a natural extrovert and leader, but most of the team that reports to me is made up of introverted natures, and I'm trying to learn how to be a more effective mentor and leader for them. Any tips?
Oh, really? What a great question. And you're doing it already, right? Just by having that question, you want to learn and you want to listen. And I would say, ask them, what's important to them, what works. Are they feeling heard? Are they feeling like it's a safe enough space? Have you created that with them so it's a safe enough space for them to speak up? So that's one. Another one would be sometimes it's just okay for introverts for it to be quiet and there's not anything wrong. I have some wonderful extroverted peers and they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? You're not talking. It's like, it's okay. I'm joyfully thinking. Like I love the silence in my, in the room, in my head, and I'm just observing. So I think it's having the conversation and not always having to fix it either. So both are true. Ask them how they're feeling, create that space, pull them out. In meetings, you might want to say, Babette, you haven't spoken up. Do you want to share something? It looks like you have something on your mind. Could be ways to draw them out. Or just accept that it's okay. And they're probably enjoying you and your extroversion, because I certainly do.
So maybe you can answer this one. How do you deal with toxic masculinity in the workplace?
Oh, head on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Geez, I don't know how else you're supposed to do it. Maybe I get this from my husband. So he always tells me, don't have me guess what you want for your birthday or anniversary. Like I don't know. Let's be really direct. And my husband's a pretty direct person and I'm not. So I always think about that. I'm maybe toxic, there's a range in there, but certainly I know they're only going to hear me if I hit it direct on, that I'm direct, that I tell them the impact, because often people don't understand the impact. You don't have to say, hey, you're being toxic, but I share, when you did this, the impact it had on me and the room was significant. Is that how you intended on coming across? Because it's having quite an impact on everybody. And I'm not sure that is the outcome. So there's ways that you can do that as well. But hitting it head on is, I don't know, the most effective for me.
Okay. So how do you find the courage to lead when your values, integrity, collaboration don't align with your male superiors? Maybe in the same vein.
Okay, say it again.
So how do you find the courage to lead when your values, integrity, and collaboration, brackets, don't align with your male superiors?
It's interesting that there's an assumption that it's male superiors, but yeah, they are, which is weird enough. That situation that I described, so I'll talk about the two recent. So, the 5-year ago one, I just stood up and said, like, I appreciate that you want me to be like that. That's not who I am. So it's not, but I am aligned with his values. I think they were just thinking of a different leadership style for me that's not aligned with my values. So I think standing up and having conviction, and you can do that in different ways. That was an effective way for me. My most recent leader, we've had to have a lot of conversations and understanding, but the biggest part and the most important part, and where I think I've seen the most movement in any male leader, is to be direct, as I mentioned, just to be direct about, this is who I am. Just because I'm female, just because I'm quiet, doesn't mean I don't have something important to say.
Mm-hmm.
Or where we're misaligned. And those have been the biggest, greatest moments, and they become incredible allies to me and
Excellent.
for me. So I would say, again, direct, tell them what's important to you.
Yeah. Have the courage.
Yeah. Insane courage.
Insane courage. So when you were searching for strength and courage inside of you, what were some of the challenges that you encountered, or have you encountered in the past?
Oh gosh, within, to dig deep and look within. I do all the time. And I think I wanted to share my story of how I grew up, because when your parent dies young, you have no foundation. You don't have people saying, oh, you're doing great. It's like, there's nothing there. So to always dig deep and say, what's bet on myself? Like, if I don't, who will?
Mm-hmm.
And to always keep that in mind, that, I am deserving. Like, I think your first session, and unfortunately I couldn't attend and I wanted to be there, but find your worth. So to dig it deep, to give yourself permission, know that you are worthy and valuable and you deserve it, and take, that step. And if you fail, do it different, try again, right? Start applying that growth mindset to it. And it's okay. You will survive it.
That's right. Here's another one too. So Maral says she has an interview tomorrow for a leadership position. First time she's interviewing for a leader position. So she's wondering if you have any advice to keep in mind as she interviews.
Oh my gosh. Good luck. Like, good luck. We're cheering for you. You got, how many people are on this call? We're sending your positive vibes. So first off, you're gonna nail it. You're gonna be awesome. Know what type of leader you are, right? Who do you want to be? Ask questions. It's a two-way interview. So you know who you are. So make sure that you're also asking questions about what's important to them. What type of leader are they looking for? What type of, I don't know if it's a new organization or not, but I would certainly ask questions around what's important to them, and maybe share things that are important to you. But good luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
That's exciting. Good for you for doing it. Love it.
Okay, so next question. I feel I am too direct in my communication as a leader, and I'm afraid I hurt people. How can I better communicate, keeping my style without feeling I'm not being authentic?
Yeah, that's a great one. I do mentor somebody similar who has that same challenge, and we all have edges that we have to work on. Like I said, mine just are slightly different, and I'm probably a little bit more indirect. So, maybe there's a few things. One, I love that you are self-aware, because that's the first step. It's really challenging for people who aren't self-aware of their edges, that they just need to soften or to harden, because we all have them. So one is being self-aware. Two, I would say, are there people that you admire? Just like me, I had to learn, and you observe and the way they interact. So you might even step in and be open and transparent and say, geez, I'm typically pretty direct, so I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I really have something important to say. So you can do things like that, where you enter it in, acknowledge what you are saying or doing, and ask them how, do they have advice? Do they have feedback? Are there certain situations? I know that I come across really direct in emails. I was told this early on in my career. I'll write my email and I'll stop and I reread it and I change it every single time. I change the intro. Hi, how are you? I put in some of those personal things, but had somebody not pointed it out, which I think is a gift, I would not do that. So now I practice. So maybe for you, it could be practicing at the beginning to, instead of jumping right into the conversation, it could be start with something else. How are you? What's going on for you? What are your kids? What's your dog doing? I'm not sure, but enter in maybe with something a little softer. You can caveat and maybe just emulate other people as well. It could be one of the areas, but don't lose who you are, because I think directness is a gift as well. So it's just softening that edge a little bit.
Yes, sorry, that kind of like ties into this next question about, do you have any phrases that you can share to sort of like enter into a conversation for an introvert? So this person's an introvert. Would you be able to share a few more go-to phrases that you use to enter a conversation?
Oh, that's really good. It depends on the context. I know they tell you not to say this in leadership and women, but I always go like, I think, and I do start with that. I think, that could be one, maybe not the number one that I would advise. That's probably number 10. I do often, because I'm a thinker as well. So not only introvert, but I can't form my thoughts as quickly. And I will often say that, okay, I'm not sure if I have this fully thought through, but I just want to share what I'm starting to think about, like something that's bothering me. And maybe you guys can help me put my finger on it, right? So I step into it that before I would wait until my thoughts were fully formed. Now I don't. And people give you permission and they know, right? So if you can name it at the beginning, those might be some ideas. Yeah.
Excellent. What did you do to become more visible at work? Like when you saw the assessment and said your visibility was 0. So what did you do?
It's so devastating. I just spoke up
Sorry, I didn't
more.
mean to
No. I'm just teasing because it's funny because it was at the moment going 0, like nobody can see me. Um, wasn't that. I just spoke up. I just took those chances. I said, okay, here's my moment. Okay, I know this topic. And, I would just enter into the conversation. Sometimes it would be clunky. I didn't have that finesse to answer to enter in the ways that I've just described. It was a little bit clunky, but it was okay. And then it was okay. Either people didn't react, they didn't say anything, or they engaged in a conversation. Either way, it was okay. And my goal was to speak up, not to be necessarily right or, to take over the conversation. It was to enter. So set little mini goals. I'm going to speak up twice in meetings in one day. I'm going to speak up twice all week, whatever it is, right? That you need to do. You got to set goals and you just got to do it. And think about the courage, the 20 seconds of courage.
That's excellent. That's a good approach. Set those mini goals. I like that. Here's another one. Do you have any tips on how to navigate company leadership that is very driven by internal politics when, as an introvert, it can feel like exhausting emotional labor? So how to navigate company leadership driven by internal politics?
I think one thing that I also did early in my career, it's called Erroneous Beliefs. I learned this through one of those assessments when I said the world should not have politics, or anytime you're using the word should, it's a clue that it may not be true. So I think one thing is accepting there's politics everywhere. You're not going to get away from it. There's politics at work. I had to accept that. How you interact with those politics is one thing. I mean, that's another thing, but accepting them first off helps, right? They're there, they're going to happen. How you engage with that is really important, and you can decide. I had somebody who reports to me today share very openly, and I love this when people start sharing with you that report to you, like that's a gift, right? That you're creating that environment. So I took it as a complete gift, and I hope he doesn't mind. I'm going to share this. Won't name names. But we were talking about, we're going through layoffs in the organization. We're going through a lot of uncertainty. And we were in a meeting with, my leader, and people were speaking up. They were being very cheerful and rosy. But previous to the meeting, they were not that way. They were very, frustrated or whatever. And he reflected that he kept thinking, should I speak up for the sake of it? Because I need to, prove myself. I need to be heard. I need to do things. And he said, I decided not to. And it relates to politics because it would have been politicking for him to do that for the sake of just being heard so that he was visible. And I said, you know what? I'm so proud that you had the self-awareness that you were going to speak up for that reason. And it took courage for you not to. It took courage for you to just be okay that, not politicking or speaking up for the sake of it. You might not be seen or heard by him, by the senior leader, but you knew it wasn't the right thing to do. And I'm really proud of you for that, which is the opposite. He is an extrovert, but I was just really proud of him because his intention, you need to speak up if you have something to say. But if you're playing games and you call it and you realize that it's not the right thing to do, like that's awesome. So I think it's an individual choice on how you engage in those politics.
Yeah, that's excellent. Here's a more of kind of a comment question, but women often frequently try to fix things that are broken. So how do we not as a leader, how do we not do that?
That question, I think about two ways, right? In ourselves, like how do we celebrate our strengths, our gifts, what we're convicted to, being okay with that. Like, I love that. You don't have to fix everything. And this goes to the example that I said, on the list of 10 things, we're picking ourselves off, up because, or we're picking on ourselves because we don't have 2, but we have 8 of the 10, right? Like, it's not doing that. And then in others, I think it's encouraging and recognizing and celebrating their strengths. So I don't know if I answered that well.
Yeah, I think I think you did. I think you did, just, staying strong to your conviction, and again, having the courage to say, this isn't mine. This isn't mine to fix. And,
Yeah. You don't always have to
and
fix it. Let's celebrate the strengths and the great things.
right,
We
right.
do that with everything. We do it too much. And I think we need to, like, that's why I like the growth mindset. It's not fully fixing, it's tweaking, right?
Mhm.
It could be that, or it's how do I build on my strength? That's not an easy thing to do because we are challenged. We always want to fix things. Yeah.
Right. Here's another one. Do you think sometimes being too direct will put you in disadvantage or even in trouble?
I think there's a time and a place. I think being direct is really important and being clear is really important, especially as a leader. And I think it depends on there's intention behind everything. So it's the intention. So is it about what's right or who's right? Some people are very direct because they want to be right. And other people need to be direct, as I mentioned when we were talking about, that word, toxicity, or other things where you need to be very direct. So I think it's situational and I think it's intention. So if you're
Mhm.
direct because it's important for that situation and what's right, that's important. I don't know. It depends the culture. I think some people are direct. I think there's a difference between direct and tact as well. So you can be direct and bring a whole ton of tactfulness into that conversation as well, and to learn from that.
Yeah, that's very true. As opposed to lots of emotion, just with tact, calmness,
I think there
honesty.
was a question about emotion in there and women. I saw that earlier. And so just because you mentioned emotion, I don't know. I don't know where I saw this. It was probably a movie or something. And they said, well, you're being too emotional. And, and I don't know. And it was like, well, geez, did you see the guys win the Super Bowl? Like they're freaking emotional winning a Super Bowl. I can be emotional. And it was okay. And again, it was a little bit of permission to say, guys get emotional all the time. You can get emotional for sports and Super Bowls and, hockey games. I can be emotional here. So I don't know. That's what I think of when it's like, you're too emotional. It's, yeah, well, that's who
Yeah,
I
that's
am.
great. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, there was a, how do you navigate female stigma of being too emotional or being too cold?
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
get that. Like sometimes I get the cold one. They just don't know me. That's okay. That's that last one where my opinion has to matter a little bit more in those cases when you know who you are and that 90% of your feedback and your close friends and the people you care about aren't giving you that feedback. You might be able to disregard one or two on the if you're getting it consistently and from people close to you, it might be something to look at.
Right, right. So not reacting to everybody's opinion either. If you're strong in your convictions, you know what kind of leader you are, then
Yeah.
you're confident. You're a confident leader, and you don't need to worry about what everybody thinks, everybody's opinion
Yeah.
of you. Yeah.
Don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from.
Oh, that's a good one. Don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from. I want everybody to write that down. That's a really good one.
I'll remind you tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's see here. We've got a couple other ones. So how do you deal with non-supportive female leaders when you don't align with how they want the team to be, type A personality, and you're more introverted? I think it's a little similar to
Yeah.
some of the other ones, but
I mean, it's challenging for sure. Like there's just different personalities and not everybody's going to be aligned with mine. I do get the impression sometime, and this is where my quotes come in. As you see, I have way too many. But the kindness, my kindness is not weakness, right? So I think of that, and then that will get me inspired to have maybe different or more direct conversations about aligning. And I align on what is right. So let's have a conversation about what's important to you, Miss Female peer or leader, and let's have a conversation, because I think it's really important to be direct in those instances where you're misaligned and aligned and focus on what's right and take I always try to separate what people are saying and then what their intention is, right? So I try to get at both, like, what's your intention? And then how are they saying it? It could be two different things, right? And I always listen for those two, because if their intention is good, but how they said it offended me, well, that's my problem. But if their
Right.
intention is not, if they're not being nice and they have no intention on being nice, then that's a whole other story. We'll have a conversation about that too, right? But I think being direct and knowing the difference is important to me. I don't shy away from those things, although some people might think I do.
How, and maybe this is something if you have a story you can share around this, is how do you build your credibility, or how have you built your credibility in the past? Questions around credibility.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I think about credibility often. So you got to back up what you say. So I do what I say I'm going to do, and I'll try really hard. If I can't, if I say, we're going to talk next week, we're going to talk next week. So there's something in doing what you said you're going to do. And there always things happen, but that's a really important one to me. It's always follow up and do what you say you're going to do. You got to put your money where your mouth is too. That old adage, like, you got to know your stuff. So if you're going to speak up, if you're going to do something, you have to be able to back it up as well, right? Tell my kids that often, especially as they're teenage boys, you got to back it up, right? You can't just go out there and be a jerk. They play baseball and football. It's like, you got to go out and show it on the field that you are capable and you can do what you're expecting of others. So, and I really hope I do this. I don't expect more of them than I do of myself. So those are some things that I think are important for me for credibility. So transparency, do what you say you're going to do, back it up, and put in as much effort as everybody else.
That's excellent. A couple more just popped in. So what is your advice to handle a senior leader who is controlling, constantly undermines your leadership, and micromanages? Whoa.
That's tough. Geez, we had a town hall this week, and that was like a private conversation I was having with somebody as well, because those are really challenging. I mean, sharing impact with your leader about the impact it's having, because I'm actually surprised that a lot of people don't know the impact. And I know there's a lot of coaches on the line who might be able to even offer better advice than me in this space, but I'm always surprised that people don't understand the impact that they have on others. And that is true of people who are more dominant or controlling, and they think they're helping. Like, they think they're helping and giving you the answers. And where I'm like, no, I'm okay to be quiet, or, but they, it's just part of trying to fix or problem solve. So I would share the impact that they are having. If that doesn't work and you have an HR organization, I would go talk to them. Like, I would seek advice that way. I don't know if you have manager once removed opportunities. So we do, so my team gets to meet with my leader and share the impact that I have on them, good and bad and ugly. And I think that's a wonderful process to have. So there's some things that are organizational, and there's some things I think we just have to step in, but I would enter that conversation by having clear examples and impact on you that they are having, right? Not using the language of you are doing this, but the impact when this happens, or yeah. So I would frame it that way. I don't know if any coaches have any other advice they want to put into the chat, but those are some things that come to mind for me.
Oh, that's great. That's a great advice. You don't take out the personal piece of it or the accusatory tone of it. Just talk about, the impact that their behavior is having on you. Here's another one that just came in. You mentioned culture and managing change as part of your role. What are the important aspects for you in this process and to create the culture and behaviors you're looking for?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Important aspects for you in the process. So let me talk about the process that we're using around culture and change. So we're using a few things. I think data is really important. I think using data in change and understanding the impact of change is important. I think data, my cat's trying to escape my room, so you might hear some noise here. From a culture perspective, we measure and we remeasure and we remeasure. So one thing I would say for a process, having data and having a clear process of how you're going to gather that data and at what frequency and what you're going to do with it is really important. So that goes to accountability. The other thing we try to share around culture, and we have 4 phases that we're going through. One is you need to be clear. So you need to articulate what your culture is. You need to be clear what it is and what your expectations are. The second thing is you need people to understand the culture and the change, right? We call it a bit of activate because it's an active, it's a verb. You want people to truly get the words, get the change, understand the implications. So that's step 2, from the third perspective in that process, we talk about it, hardwiring or hard coding the culture or the change in the organization. So if you're talking about a culture of trust, but you have approvals to order a pen, and they have to go 10 layers or your boss has to approve everything you do, it doesn't make you feel very trusted. So we talk about hardwiring, embedding, and whether it's people practices or what else that you have, that's really important. And then the last phase is the measure, is the data. Are we making the progress? What do we need to learn? You pivot, and it's not a linear, culture's not linear. We use trust and inclusion as our foundation to our culture. And, I often get asked for like, what's the roadmap? What's the project plan to trust? And I really wish that I knew. Those are all deeply personal. I can use that frame and I can help the things that reinforce the culture. But those behaviors are deeply personal and you need to want to.
Mhm.
Do you guys remember that movie? I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. Oh my gosh. And it was Jennifer Aniston and this other guy, and they got in a fight and they were engaged. And he did not want to empty the dishwasher. Do you remember? I see Rhonda. And he's like, fine, I'll empty the dishwasher. And she goes, no, I don't want you to do it. I want you to want to do it. And it's the same. I don't know. I think about that in culture. It's like, I want them to want this new culture, and I don't know how else to have them do it other than their own purpose and values need to be aligned with the company purpose and values. So anyway, thanks for indulging me in all my videos and all my movies. I clearly watched too many. The breakup, the Vince Vaughn. Thank you, Cindy. Yes, right. I want you to want this.
And he said, I don't ever want to undo the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Exactly.
So I don't have any other questions that have popped in. There's some like about resources, which I think you've covered in that slide. Here's one. I think you've kind of covered this one, but what is one example you are most proud of where you learned to be courageous early in your career? I don't know if
Early. Yeah. I don't know if this is the best example, but it's the only one coming to mind because we talked about it yesterday. So I think there was a point in time in my previous organization where I thought, okay, am I going to continue to grow in this company? Do you have enough to offer me? And I wanted to leave, or I wanted to leave the organization or get my MBA. I think it was both. I wanted to leave and get an MBA. I just wanted more, right? I just wanted more out of what they were able to offer. So I was good to leave. And I remember speaking to a senior leader in that organization and him saying, is that really what you're going to remember when you're on your deathbed? Is that, you did an MBA and like, think more, think deeper, like, what do you want? And in that moment, I'm like, okay, I want to move to New Zealand. And interestingly enough, that came true. And I was able to move there for a few years, supported by the company. Really weird. I feel so thankful and fortunate to have had that opportunity. But I think the courage that I was willing to go and do something and pursue and to vocalize it and voice what was important to me rather than just to accept what was. So that was early in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. I have a couple that just popped in. So how do you begin to create a culture as a new leader entering an established team?
Yeah. Well, I would say, what do you value? Right. So it depends whether it's the companies or not, but let's assume that you're creating, your own culture, I think it's important to think about, what do you stand for? What's important to you, your team? Is that being open and transparent? Is it being truthful? Is it being respectful? If you're in an operational environment, is it safety? I think you have to list out, and you can list out with them, right? You can have a frame. What I love the most is co-creating, right? So even when we did our Suncor values, we started with some, and then we tested with employees, and they shifted them and changed them. And some of you on the call were part of that process, and they made them better, right? So I think having a frame, what's important to you, what's important to the team, engaging, co-creating, and then putting them on the wall, and most importantly, living to them every single day and being convicted to them is important.
Do you have any thoughts on mentoring?
Lots. So do I mentor? Do I?
It just says thoughts on mentoring.
Oh,
so
I
maybe
love
if it's
mentoring.
of value. Yeah.
I think mentoring's a gift, right? If I can help somebody, and usually for me, it's somebody calls up, and if they have the courage to reach out and say, hey, do you have time? I'd like to talk. I'd like to get your advice. Can you be my mentor? I sign up. Yes, absolutely. No question. Like, let's do it. Like once a month, what do you need? Right. So I'm a big advocate of mentoring. It takes time to mentor, and it takes time and courage for them. So I think, as a leader, it's important. And I am thankful for any time that I have mentoring opportunities with others as well, peers, other people. So I think it's an important thing to do. We should all do it. It can be formal, it could be informal, but there's no greater gift. And you learn more probably from those opportunities than they do.
I'm thinking your LinkedIn is going to be buzzing after this. People asking you to
Love to.
be a
Let's
mentor.
connect.
So in that same vein, do you have any advice on how to pick a mentor for junior employees, for example, who aspire to become leaders in the future? Like, how do they go about?
Oh, you know what? I think you need a lot of mentors. I don't know that you focus too much on picking one. I think you need to think about, what is it that you need to learn, and who is best to teach you that. And that could be 2 sessions, that could be 10 sessions, that could be 10 months. But what is it that I want to learn from that person? So we talked a lot about, maybe it's an extrovert who, and I don't just mean to be extrovert, but it was somebody who talked about being more direct, and they want to soften that. Maybe for the next, you ask for mentoring for that specific area. It doesn't have to be a full career. So I think you can take a few mentors and people that help you with different aspects, because we're not all strong on all areas. So that would probably be my advice. Start, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Start, it's not working, it's okay, move on.
Yeah, great. Well, I think we've got time for one more question. There's a couple of, there's one more here that, have you ever been in a position where you tried working with HR to help with micromanaging a belittling boss and found you received zero support from HR?
Yes.
And have you ever sought the help of an employment attorney?
Wow. I'm sorry if
Maybe
that's your situation. No, it's
hard.
hard. Like, so first my empathy comes out if that's a situation, because that takes a toll. If that's a personal situation. So one, I'm sorry that that's happening. Two, I've been part of HR for quite a long time, and I know that that happens a lot. That sometimes it's challenging. We as an organization, and I don't know if yours does, has an anonymous hotline or tip line where you can call, and those have been some of the best routes as well, because sometimes those people are more equipped to handle some of those tougher employment situations. So you could do that. And absolutely, if you have to see a lawyer, just make sure you have specific examples and dates and situations, and if people are around, because that could help as well.
I have one more that I'm hoping you can squeeze in, and then I think we'll have to start wrapping it up. But do you have any advice on how to set boundaries for yourself to keep maximizing the strength while managing that sort of that weaker side?
Gosh, you probably got one of my things I need to work on, setting boundaries. somebody had said to me too, you teach people how to treat you. So I think setting boundaries is really important. I think we shouldn't shy away from that. And I don't know what context it is. So I think it's important for people to understand, you know, trust is a deal breaker for me, or my family's important, or, I'm going to get things done, or there could be different areas where you need to set boundaries. I think you need to do them, because otherwise, if you leave it go too long, then that just becomes harder to get out of that situation. So I do set boundaries. I'm probably not as great at it, if I have to be honest, because I want to help people or be involved with people, or, and sometimes at my expense, that I recognize that. But I think having a conversation with people about the toll, if it's having on you, is also important.
That's excellent. So I think we're at 7:50. We'll wrap up that Q&A. I'll bring Susan on to close out the session, and we'll mention sort of our next part 3 session. But Tammy, I just wanted to thank you for that, excellent session, and being so open and authentic with us during the Q&A. So I'll just call Susan to come on and close us out.
Thank you. Thanks for facilitating that. Thank you to everybody for the questions and for being on the line. I appreciate your time. I know everybody takes a bit of their personal time to be here, so thank you for that. I appreciate the engagement. And to Susan and the Lean In Calgary gang here, thank you. And I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate you again having me.
Thanks, Tammy. I should have probably thrown it to you for any last words. Thanks.
Thank you, Tammy, so much for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. I know I've gotten a lot of really wonderful nuggets out of your insights, and I love your journey and just the realness and the authenticness that you brought to your role. And what I'm hearing is that you got to where you are today by being you, by being curious, by being courageous, and by doing what you felt was right, by really being true to you. And I think that is something that, as a coach myself, I know that women every day, I mostly coach women, I still coach men too, but most question their decisions, question how they're showing up, because am I frozen?
You are frozen, but we can hear you. Oh, maybe we can't.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back.
I don't know where I stopped, but I was heaping praise on Tammy. So I was going on and on and on while I was frozen.
Oh, I don't think we heard that. Maybe we need to hear that again. No, I'm joking. We heard it. It was wonderful. Thank you.
But I was saying that women often question themselves about, is this the right thing? Should I be showing up this way? And often they're showing up with something that's unique to them, something that's going to cause them to rise within the ranks in the organization. And what I also know, like especially the idea around Strengths Finder and so on, is that if you focus on your strengths versus building your weaknesses, you'll be stronger for it. So I really believe in a strength-based approach to leadership too. Thank you so much. And thank you as well to Babette and Rhonda and Brittany from our Lean In Calgary team, and Julia for bringing together this event this evening. We have an awesome volunteer, it's all volunteer run and led. For those of you who are new to Lean In, the only part of the organization that is funded is the org itself out of California, and they produce programming and so on. But out here in the colonies, like Canada, we're fully run by volunteers. And one of the gifts of COVID is that we've been able to run these events for free, because there's really no charge to us for putting out amazing quality programming, as long as we have amazing quality people like Tammy agreeing to speak to our community. So thanks again for that. So as we shared before, this is a 3-part series on confidence. I'm sure we could have like a 12-part series on confidence. But I'm so excited to share with you our next event. Vanessa Stockbroker is in the house. She's been, I think, at all of our Lean In events since we started in September 2019. And Vanessa is a sought after speaker and will be coming to us live to talk about financial confidence. So Tammy, Vanessa is has a long background in finance, and she's the founder of Women's Sense, which is her own privately held company, and is a financial educator and coach, helping women and couples across Canada take care of their money, reduce stress, and create the life they want to live. And Vanessa tells us that when it comes to our finances, most women want to build knowledge, gain confidence in making decisions, and know we have financial security for the future. But it's really interesting how many women actually don't have control of their finances, even in their partnerships with their husbands or partners. They often don't. And what Vanessa shared with me is that, you know what, when these couples, sometimes they split, sometimes there's divorce, and then one of the first things the woman does is get rid of her financial advisor and get one who will listen to her, right? Like, women seek something different when it comes to hearing from their financial advisor and needing to understand and take control of their financial future. And Vanessa is going to lead us through some wonderful strategies to help us do that. Really excited to have Vanessa come to us. It'll be a Wednesday evening, 6 weeks from now, on May 19th at 6:30 p.m. So thank you, Vanessa, in advance for bringing your time and talents for this incredible presentation. I'm really excited to hear all about the financial closet and how I can clean it out and make better financial decisions. So look forward to seeing you all there. Again, one last plug for Lean In Canada /Calgary. Sign up for the newsletter. We actually don't write very many newsletters. It is something we're trying to write more, but as volunteers, we're not getting a lot out. So you won't get spam. You will mainly get the odd newsletter and information about upcoming events. So please do sign up, and I look forward to seeing you all in May. Okay, thanks everyone.